And welcome back, everybody. We are here for the second stream match of today. I myself am Trusted Demos, and right now I am joined by the lovely Gabby Snyder. After a very thrilling start to this day, essentially, we did have that very dramatic ending there between Ireland, of course, and South Africa. Ireland being able to progress onto the next stage, which is great for them. So commiserations to South Africa. But we have another teeth-grinding set right now between two countries that are just going to try to go ahead and essentially wrap up the position that they are really wanting to get to qualify onto the playoff stage, Gabby.
Yeah, it's interesting when you get to this stage of the tournament. We really are in of phase one. You start getting a lot of these matches that come down to the wire. And for this week's matchup, if you want to take a look at it, of Mexico versus Bolivia, we are also in a similar situation. These teams are really close in the running. And I believe that it's still possible for Mexico to move on, provided they win one out of their two remaining games, which I think one just actually resolved while the stream was live. Correct me if I'm wrong, Costa.
Initially I thought that was the case too, but I may be wrong. So
no worries.
So that's my bad. What we will have to do is, of course, still reference the website. The website still does have Bolivia versus Mexico at the minute. I mean, we'll reveal it in just a hot second, but essentially, it is all up for grabs, like you mentioned, Gabby. If Mexico at least win one of their last two remaining sets, one of those sets being the one that is going to be streamed right now, they will qualify. But if they lose both of these last two remaining matches, they will probably end up tying with Venezuela, and then a tiebreaker match would be needed to try to resolve who progresses on to the next stage.
So for now, though, we only have one match in front of us, and that's going to be Adrián Oviedo from Bolivia versus Abraham Orta from Mexico. And as we saw on the little interstitial stream that we have going on, or screen going on, they're running some pretty interesting teams, but kind of align with the other teams that we've seen so far this week from both Bolivia and Mexico as a whole. There's some nice diversity in there. I see like a Lunala, a Yveltal, and a Calyrex Shadow, and I feel like those are some pretty deep cuts right now.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, you kind of seen the plethora of different restricteds being opted to try to counteract, essentially, the main staple of the current meta, that being, of course, those Kyogre, Calyrex Shadow Riders, and the Zacian teams. We've had a bit of a resurgence of Lunala that we have noticed, and, of course, where Lunala is strong, so is Yveltal. So it definitely tries to pop its head around the corner, and it's been able to win, lose as well in this matchup between Bolivia and Mexico. But of course, it's just such a fascinating Pokemon, to be honest with you. It just has a lot of utilities to it, and I think there is still room for it to try to expand itself onto the current meta as well.
Definitely. So again, let's go ahead and take a look at the teams that both Adrián and Abraham will be running this week in the upcoming matchup. We're going to take a look at Abraham's team first, and I see a Groudon, I see some grass-type Pokemon, Costa, but I don't see the one grass-type Pokemon I was expecting.
I know! Where is the Cherrim? Where is the lovely little happy Pokemon, the flower Pokemon? It's not here, Gabby, but of course, we do still have this sun mode, heavy sun mode, should I say, with the Groudon and the Entei. And of course, with the resurgence of the Rain Dance Tornadus, now essentially growing in popularity, this Whimsicott does have a potential of even learning Sunny Day to try to force that sun mode if, for whatever reason, let's say, Abraham were to try to encounter Rain Team.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, Costa, because I think there is a Rain team on the opposing side of the field waiting for Abraham to face off against, if we want to go ahead and take a look. Costa, why don't you walk us through this team? Because I need to check something on my microphone real quick.
Oh, of course, no problem at all. So, moving on from Abraham's team right now onto his opponents, Adrian's Oviedo, we can see, of course, Santino's team essentially that won the 25th Invitational event. It looked pretty much like it. I probably think it would be pretty much like, I'm not sure about the Incineroar, I don't remember if it was, of course, on the team, but the remainder were definitely. The Weavile has so much utility. It essentially has the fastest fake out right now in the current meta from what we've seen. You've got that heavy rain mode with the Tornadus. Tornadus is just so oppressive with the rain dance potential that it does have, as well as any potential taunts it may have. I don't think Santino's spread did actually have it, but it's got a lot of pressure from its side to just go ahead, force any sort of speed control it wants to. So it is quite interesting to see, as Abraham has actually brought a stack attacker, but I'm not sure if he may opt to go for the Trick Room on his side of the field.
It's tough to say, and hopefully my voice is coming in loud and clear, but I really do like this combination, not just because it did do so well in the Players' Cup Invitational recently, but it's just a good balance of a lot of these Pokemon that we've seen, you know, paired with the Kyogre throughout the season so far, or the seasons even so far. So for this matchup, I also really like how we're seeing that traditional Kyogre versus Groudon, you know, the Hoenn Titans facing off as well. So I don't know how you're feeling, Costa, but I am ready to jump into this match if you are.
Oh, I definitely am. So, of course, like you mentioned, Gabby, we've got Battle for Hoenn right now, Battle for Domination. Who will come on top, the Kyogre or the Groudon team? Like we mentioned, of course, the Stack Attacker could potentially be interesting here, but I think the Regieleki does still have a place here. It could try to maybe exert speed control if it can from its end, accompanied by that Whimsicott, which, of course, does have that Prankster ability, just like Tornadus does. So you may even see an interaction of Prankster taunts coming from one side to the other.
I would love to see that, because that harkens back to the first format when Whimsicott and Tornadus were allowed. You know, people would run Whimsicott specifically because it could outspeed the opposing Tornadus and go for that taunt. Mind you, now there's enough mental herb around, as we can even see on this Whimsicott, that's not as big of a concern as it once was. But going into this game one, you know, I like how you called out the importance of the Regieleki here. Yes, it doesn't have the best matchup against some of the grass-type Pokemon on the opposing side of the field, but it's still it's still going to be a powerful Pokemon when you consider how fast it is, when you consider that it does have that Focus Sash to give it artificial bulk that it really does need in this format. So it looks like these trainers are ready, so let's get this match started.
Of course. One thing to note as well, that Abraham does not have any sort of terrain on his side of the field, so we have seen huge pressure from that Rillaboom and Serena combination, which we will not be seeing coming out of as leads from Adrian's side. We do see the Weavile exerting its pressure on the field, accompanied by the Tornadus versus Abraham's Regieleki and Whimsicott.
So right off the bat, we're in a situation where the taunt games could come into play. But an interesting thing to note about Abraham's Whimsicott, as we do have the benefit of watching this game from his perspective, is that he's chosen to go use Encore instead of taunt. And that's a very particular choice for a Pokemon like Whimsicott. Encore is probably one of the most frustrating moves to be staring down if you're on the opposing side of the field. And rather than worry about, you know, disabling those non-attacking moves, you can simply lock your opponent into any given move for 5 turns, or for 3 turns now. So if your opponent uses Tailwind, that's a perfect candidate to do so.
It really is, as we do see the Electro Web coming out after both Prankster Pokemon went for the Tailwinds. It does connect onto the Tornadus and Weavile. We did see the reveal of the Wakan Berry, which does, of course, halve all electric type damage dealt onto Tornadus there from the Electro Web. And the Weavile doesn't even opt to go for the fake out here, just goes for the raw triple axle, connects the second time and the third to be able to go ahead and get rid of that Tailwind Prankster capability on the Whimsicott for future turns over on Abraham's side.
if Weavile had gone for a fake out that turn and targeted the Whimsicott, Whimsicott would have still been free to go for a Tailwind or any other attack this turn, such as a Taunt or an Encore. So Adrian realizing that even though the flinch would have been helpful, possibly to stop damage from a Regieleki, given that the Whimsicott's presence on the field was such a threat, it was better to just knock it out entirely and just have to deal with a few turns of Tailwind matched on both sides of the field. Then go for another approach. And I really like that approach. You know, one of these issues when you're staring down Pokemon with the Prankster ability is that they are so frustrating at times because you know they're going to go first. You know that they're going to have the opportunity for Tailwinds, for Taunts, for what have yous. And by knocking out those Pokemon, as most of them are fairly frail, you can handle the threat a lot better. And you can even save the Weavile for later on in the matchup. And that's going to be key as well.
Exactly, as Incineroar is now going to be on the field, we'll be able to drop that Serena's attack if it does opt to go for any sort of damage there. But before that, we see the Thunderbolt dealing over half damage worth onto the Incineroar there. Very good damage. Triple Axle connects a second time onto the Tornadus, then not a third to try to get a bit more damage dealt onto it. But Tornadus, in retaliation, goes for the Icy Wind. And kind of what we were talking about, Gabby, as well. We do have the Tornadus there. Even if it wasn't using its Prankster ability there, the Icy Wind is so crucial into trying to gain that momentum and advantage over speed control on Adrian's side.
Exactly, and as soon as this Incineroar is faster than the Serena, it can go for a Flare Blitz and secure a knockout. Could also deal some big damage to the Regieleki if that's what Adrian is prioritizing at this point. But I like how the Tornadus is built for speed control, not just the Tailwind, because you do end up with a lot of matchups now where trainers have both the Tailwind and a speed lowering move like Electro Web or Icy Wind. And just acknowledging that and seeing how key it is to this matchup is a great sign from both these trainers.
Yeah, as the Electro Web is going to pick up that KO onto the Tornadus. It does a miss onto that Incineroar, so it could have gotten a bit more chip damage dealt onto there and maybe even helped the Serena in that situation. But Flare Blitz coming out absolutely knocks the Serena out, as we do see the Incineroar recover its berry after first, of course, receiving that recoil damage from that Flare Blitz. But at this point, Gabby, I do feel like Adrian kind of has to control the tempo, maybe bring the Kyogre in if he can, unless of course we do see the Groudon being revealed as the last Pokemon on Abraham's side.
You always want to save your weather Pokemon for last in a matchup as classic as Sun versus Rain for this exact scenario. I mean, to be fair, Weavile's not even a bad choice in this situation. It can go for a flinch with Fake Out. It can go for a Triple Axle, which is super effective against Groudon since it is only a ground type without that Primal Reversion. So it may not be the best play. It may be tempting to send in that Kyogre and immediately go for those Choice Scarf Water Spouts. But in this case, Adrian is guaranteed the weather whenever it's going to happen. So you might as well just let it happen naturally.
Yeah, and he got the right read there. He went for the Fake Out onto the Groudon as the Regieleki opted to go for the Protect, and it was able to guard itself from the Flare Blitz. Surely KO in the Sun there.
KO in the Sun, definitely. Regieleki is not a frail Pokemon, and Adrian also just making sure that any Pokemon that could potentially threaten the Kyogre will be removed from the field by the time it makes an appearance.
Electroweb comes out just after Feint did onto the Groudon slot, just in case it wanted to try to go for the Protect there, and it could have potentially broken it, as the Groudon will be moving after that Electroweb, nailing both those KOs with the Precipice Blades, not missing at all. So Adrian is gonna probably have that Kyogre there with the Choice Scarf in the back, Gabby, like we were talking about. So the real question is, can it outspeed this Regieleki now that the Icy Wind stat stages have been dropped and essentially forced onto it?
It really depends on what item this Kyogre is holding. I think going into this matchup in particular, I assumed it was a Choice Scarf because that is what you would see on a Kyogre traditionally in the setup. So Choice Scarf Water Spout here 100% wins the game. Regieleki doesn't have its Sash anymore, but good confirmation for both Abraham and Adrian that the speeds are what one would expect in this situation, and that Water Spout just can get it done.
can definitely get it done, was able to go ahead and sweep up that lovely little win for game one there over on Adrian's side of the field. So we saw that it was, of course, a lot of speed control. It was a very high octane, high momentum kind of gameplay. It was just all about the battle of speed control. Who can effectively get it up, get the speed control going for their side of the field, whilst also having that sweeping restricted in the back, which of course does bring the weather control too. So like we were talking about, is where Adrian, I felt, was just able to handle it so much better and efficiently, should I say, up until waiting for the correct moment to bring that Kyogre in.
Yeah, it was a close matchup, I think, because it really does come down to who gets those first two knockouts to force out the restricted Pokemon. Something that both these trainers could consider going into game two is maybe switch things up and actually lead your restricted Pokemon. If you look at the Pokemon that are on excuse me, I completely spaced out for a second. If you look at the Pokemon that are on, Groudon side of the field, we have no fake out users. And Kyogre with a choice scarf would certainly appreciate being on the field without staring down a fake out user. So I think I would consider, especially if you're a choice scarf Kyogre, maybe go out for the lead, see if you can connect a couple attacks, get those knockouts, and then switch out the Kyogre for something like the Incineroar once you no longer have that opportunity anymore.
Yeah, and that Weavile, like you had talked about when Adrian was able to bring it in on his side of the field, it wasn't that bad at all in the positioning against Groudon, because Ice type, of course, is still super effective against it. It has so many options it could go for, whether that being feint, fake out, or just that raw triple axle damage, as it could have easily targeted down that Groudon. As we do see the leads for game two, ladies and gents, the Serena, Incineroar on Adrian's side, whilst on Abraham's side we've got the Regieleki and Whimsicott yet again.
So another solid lead, I think, from both these trainers. The thing that surprises me the most, though, is that Adrian did leave that Tornadus behind, possibly entirely, which is something that's going to be important to look out for. Serena is an interesting adjustment. You would think it would struggle in this matchup against Groudon in particular, but if Adrian is confident in his ability to control the speed on the field or otherwise ensure that the Serena will be faster than the Groudon when it does come time to attack, I think it's a great adjustment. Yes, you don't benefit as much from Queensley's Majesty, but the inherent bulk a Serena has, plus access to triple axle, could really be key in this matchup.
That's going to be seen. The Regieleki opt to go for that near guaranteed to hit KO, as well as pick up a paralysis, because you know what, it definitely can. Onto the Incineroar, we do see the triple axle coming out from Adrian's Serena onto Abraham's, not quite enough to pick up the KO there. And to note, of course, that was the Whimsicott slot prior to this, so of course that switch in may have not been the best, maybe in anticipation of that fake out from Adrian's side to try to catch him off guard essentially, but it kind of didn't work that well because the synergy, essentially both Pokemon shared the same typing, which meant of course the same weakness, as we do actually see Tornadus being brought now, Gabby.
That's interesting. It most likely indicates that the Serena on Adrian's side of the field was brought instead of Weavile, and I really do like that adjustment. Serena, again, is a lot slower, but I think it has a better matchup against a few Pokemon on Abraham's side of the field.
Yes, we're going to be seeing the Tailwind, of course, being set up from that Tornadus. That is why it is there, as it was able to take that damage so well from the Electro Web, thanks to its Wakan Berry. Whilst the, of course, the Serena will have its speed drop now as well, but that will not stop it from going for the triple axle now into the Regieleki slot, and unfortunately it only landed one hit out of potential 3 there, as Serena on Abraham's side of the field goes for the U-turn into Adrian's Serena. Will be actually recovering from a citrus berry there, but more importantly, Abraham will be getting that free pivot switch in that he wanted to, and maybe even get a Tailwind up for himself.
Tailwind up for yourself, or you could even try and go for the Encore onto the Tornadus if you think it's going to get greedy and stay in and attack. I think given that the Regieleki seems to be comfortable and want to stay out on the field for another turn, that's not necessarily your best play, but it's something to keep in mind, especially when you're staring down a Whimsicott, and is most likely why Adrian decided to go for the switch here.
Yeah, exactly, as Incineroar is now going to be showing its face back onto the field, have that fake out pressure potentially for the subsequent turn, as Whimsicott will now be opting to go for the Tailwind, wanting to get that speed control on their side of the field, and that Thunderbolt actually not picking up the KO onto the Incineroar. That did seem to have been a near minimum roll there, judging from the damage dealt in previous game 1 and this game 2 earlier on, as the triple axle there will be just...
There it goes.
Oh my lord! There is the invisible, somewhat focus sash being able to survive the triple axle from the Serena, my lord.
And more importantly, Whimsicott can come back out onto a field when it doesn't have to worry about like a fake out or another attack knocking it out. I gotta give it to that Whimsicott. It knew exactly how to hold on and keep that threat of Encore against the opposing Tornadus alive for the rest of this game.
Yeah, and there we go. The Serena's back on the field, showing off its Queenly Majesty ability, stopping all priority from Adrian's side, and that faked out Thunderbolt. Oh my...
Oh!
Misses the KO, yet again, talk about misses. The triple axle misses as well.
That was a pretty intense turn, all things considered. You know, I think we were expecting to see at least one Pokemon knocked out, but these Thunderbolts, I'm starting to wonder if that Incineroar is as bulky as it is for a reason, because as far as I'm aware, there have been no special attack lowering moves set up on Adrian's side of the field yet. Especially given the Citrus Berry on that Serena, that Incineroar might be holding an Assault Vest.
It may somewhat have a second item slot available to it after the...
Right.
Yeah, but of course, no, I'm just joshing, as we're going to be seeing the triple axle from Abraham's Serena. Second hit connect, and it, yes, gets that third one to be able to pick up the KO there, leaving Adrian down to his final 2 Pokemon in this game too.
Just as Tailwind runs out as well on Adrian's side of the field, so this Regieleki is going to be in a perfect spot to go for some speed control, some of those Electro Webs, especially when Adrian's last 2 Pokemon are that Tornadus and the Kyogre.
Yeah.
Tornadus can go for a priority Tailwind this turn, which may give Kyogre the advantage. Uh-oh.
Oof.
Okay, no disconnects. We're good. We're good.
Yeah.
I always panic when I do that myself. But given the fact that the Regieleki... Actually, hold on. Let me rewind that back a little bit. I think Adrian's in a perfectly comfortable position to go for Tailwind and Water Spout. I think the big question for Adrian is, when does the Groudon make an appearance? And when that happens, how does he handle it at this point?
Yeah, and of course, because of the Tailwind still being on Abraham's side of the field, this will mean that Regieleki is still faster than the potential choice scarf Kyogre there, or should I say confirmed from seeing that game 1. And the Kyogre, recognizing that, goes for the Scald, doesn't even opt to go for the Water Spout there. Critical hit onto the Regieleki. I don't think that matters at all there, as it is a very strong move, especially powered by the rain. Triple axle there. The first hit was a critical hit onto the Tornadus, and the second one does connect, leaving it just with a tiny bit of HP, but the third one will be able to finish up the job. But at this point, Gabby, I feel like Groudon is quite comfortable in the back as long as it doesn't get burnt somehow.
As long as it doesn't get burnt somehow from a Scald, which unfortunately for Groudon, I feel like happens more often than you'd anticipate it happening. But we are going to have a couple of turns here where, you know, it's possible that Serena will be able to connect a Power Whip to Kyogre this turn, which will wrap things up a little quicker.
Yeah.
I like how Abraham's playing this, though. You know what Kyogre is going to do for the rest of the match. It's going to Scald. That's really all it can do at this point. So it all comes down to, you know, make sure I have my speed control, make sure that Serena has these opportunities to land these attacks, and if and when Groudon does come out onto the field, hopefully I'll be okay. Fortunately for Abraham, though, that Power Whip was able to find its mark, and he'll be winning his matches for this week. That was a really fun game.
Yeah, that really was a fun game. I'm not sure. I felt like that is 1-1 right now that we're currently at. I think
Oh,
we're leading.
right. Oh, man.
You kind of faked me out as well, champion. I got
I
faked.
saw. Oh my god. I apologize, y'all. If it isn't apparent, I've been having fun adjusting to these early morning these early morning broadcasts. So
No, of
that
course.
one's on me. I saw the overlay had already updated, but this is great because this means we get to see how these trainers are going to adjust going into game 3, given how the first 2 games played out. And, you know, we did see the Kyogre sort of played a bit more conservatively this game. And I think that came into play, and it just got stuck on the field at the wrong time, you know?
Yeah, it really did, as of course, I think Abraham was able to kind of play this one much better, of course, given the fact that he won, let's say. But I think just being able to kind of control the tempo and threaten that Kyogre with its arena, especially as it is carrying that Assault Vest, is so good, because you've got the triple axle, which is so valuable on the Torina to go up against and maybe try to get any sort of damage onto the Tornadus. You've got the U-turn pivot, so you can try to bring in the Whimsicott as well. Try to enforce your own Tailwind at some point, because we saw that Adrian had set Tailwind up first, right? And that was able to kind of slither down to the point where Abraham was waiting for the correct moment to try to exert pressure when it came to speed control, and the Regieleki was there in form, and it was connecting with its Electrowebs as well, especially as the Tailwind was still up even when the Tornadus did try to get it up, and the Choice Scarf Kyogre could not outspeed the Regieleki too.
And that just goes to show you how classic I think these weather matchups are. Because one of the things I always like to talk about, especially when you're seeing these restricted Pokemon formats, is it all comes down to speed control.
Yeah.
And to have 2 games that essentially came down to who had what Tailwind up, who had the speed drops on the opposing side of the field, is really exciting and opens the door up for an adjustment like Abraham made in this turn 1 with the Stakataka on the field. It could try and go for a Trick Room this turn if that's the way that Abraham wants to play this game moving forwards. And, you know, normally I'd say Adrian wouldn't have anything to stop that, but I stand corrected.
Exactly, as we did see the Taunt being able to stop the Stakataka for going for any sort of status move, or should I say Trick Room, in this condition, as Abraham's Serena of his own is going to be opting to go and deal good damage onto that Serena on Adrian's side with a U-turn, get that pivot, bring the Regieleki in right now, as the Incineroar opts to go for the Flare Blitz, goes into that Regieleki slot, and that is such a huge momentum grab right there from Adrian's side of the field, bringing the Regieleki down to its Focus Sash, especially when it can avoid Rock Slides coming out from this Stakataka as well.
I was very surprised to see the taunt on the Serena of all Pokemon there. I would have anticipated the Incineroar having that taunt. I know that it's possible they could both have it as well, given how useful of a move it is right now. But Adrian just covering the Trick Room and ensuring that big damage would go down regardless of what that Flare Blitz connected with that turn, and put Abraham in a position where he really needs this next Rock Slide to land. Otherwise, the Incineroar is going to take another knockout easy.
As the Regieleki is going to go for that Protector, will be guarding itself from the U-turn on Serena's side, and Incineroar just slow playing it right now, bringing the Stakataka down to -2 of its attack with the Parting Shot in connection with the earlier Intimidate, allowing Adrian to get that pivot right now, and we do see the Kyogre is on the field. So at this point, of course, there is no speed control that has been established on the field, but this is still not the best situation for Abraham, as he's in a bit of a corner with the Stakataka right now, being potentially threatened by his Scald.
Being threatened by a Scald, and I think most importantly, removing what appears to be his only form of speed control from the field. You know, Regieleki will go down in a single hit, and provided this Kyogre, if Abraham decides to go for something like an Electro Web, Kyogre will probably hang on. So really forced to go for the Thunderbolt into the Kyogre spot as a result, and Adrian seeing that and making adjustments accordingly.
Well played. Makes a lot of sense as well. Incineroar will be able to tank that and get a berry recovery, whilst bringing the second attacker down to -3, not before it switches out in turn to the Tarina on Abraham's side. So it makes a lot of sense. You want to reset those stat drops on its attack. Thunderbolt does, of course, come out. We don't see the paralysis this time round as a comparison to game 2, as the Figgy Berry will be able to recover the Incineroar just a bit above its half HP range. But more importantly, the U-turn does connect this turn round onto the Regieleki, which was such a thorn in Adrian's side in that game 2. Also allowing him to bring that fresh Pokemon in from the pivot, which is going to be that Tornadus.
And unlike any of the other positions we've seen Tornadus in so far in the set, Rain is active on the field, and you have to assume that this Tornadus has access to Hurricane. I don't think we've seen Protect on it yet, so usually Hurricane is that fourth move of choice in this type of matchup, especially with the Walk-in Berry. So a good opportunity for Adrian to double into the Serena, or possibly even, you know, split the difference and go for some damage into the Stakataka as well.
As the Hurricane connects, of course, as it always and definitely does in the rain, onto the Tarina, deals a lot of damage, as the Tarina will now be switching out, goes for the via the U-turn onto the Incineroar, and this looks like, unless there's a taunt on this Incineroar, that the Trick Room will be set, which will instantly change the momentum of this game in favor of Abraham, as Groudon will naturally be slower. But no, we actually see a Will-O-Wisp and no taunt from the Incineroar. It connects onto the Stakataka, which of course will be halving all of its physical damage output there in the following turns. Not before, of course, the Stakataka successfully getting that Trick Room set up.
And the Will-O-Wisp on the Incineroar is why you can sort of play this slower game and not try and stop a Trick Room in a more direct fashion. Incineroar should have an opportunity here to get one more attack in, and if that is a Will-O-Wisp that can connect onto Abraham's Groudon, really Abraham's entire offensive force for the remainder of this game is cut in half, like exactly in half, and that's going to give Adrian an opening to stall out the remainder of the Trick Room turns, and that's going to make sure that Kyogre can stick around on the field long enough to land 2 or 3 Scalds needed to get those knockouts. Of course, Will-O-Wisp is not the most accurate move, and that is something that Adrian has to keep in mind, but if he's able to continue to make strong reads here, I don't think that'll be too much of a problem.
As we're going to be seeing the Groudon opt to go for Protect, Tornadus switched in for the Tarina right there, or should I say the other way. Rock Slide coming out, and because of that burn, is not able to pick up that Incineroar, and of course, the Will-O-Wisp did just want to try to target down that Groudon, just in case, for whatever reason, the Groudon opted to go for the Precipice Blades, and it did miss. Unless, of course, it does underspeed it.
And you also have to consider the fact that Rock Slide can miss this turn as well. So Adrian has 2 options. You know, you can try and go for some big damage with the Sun boosted Flare Blitz onto the Stakataka this turn if you don't feel confident in Will-O-Wisp, or if you don't feel confident maybe in Rock Slide missing or not, or you go for a second burn. I think you just keep rolling for burns at this point. You could possibly switch out the Incineroar, send in the Tornadus, and you know, just let it take the hit for Incineroar, so you get a guaranteed Intimidate later as well. But the Kyogre switch-in is a bit of a surprise, and if Precipice Blaze is able to connect with it, that's really going to be a tough spot for Adrian.
It really would be if it did, as the Rock Slide did, that's for sure. For this moment, it will be adding that tiny bit of damage, but we see the Serena actually moving before the Groudon within the Trick Room. Heat Crash, no Precipice Blades coming out, Gabby, but it will be able to pick up the KO onto that Serena. But what an interesting turn of events here. You saw the Kyogre switching in, both maybe in anticipation of a Heat Crash, but as well as I feel that Adrian doesn't have the best switch-ins at this point against this Groudon, but very well played from him there.
Very well played. I think that was that was really a testament to why you've run Heat Crash over Fire Punch on Groudon. You know, that extra damage, that extra base power, I think really did matter here for that Serena still getting knocked out through the rain. The Intimidate now is going to make it a little bit tougher for this Groudon to stay on the field. You also have to assume that Incineroar can go for a fake out or can try and land a second burn at this point. But still, Kyogre just really, even though you would think it would struggle in this position, being slower, having Choice Scarf, in a strong spot to take a knockout this turn. Assuming it doesn't get flinched by a Rock Slide and can connect a Scald with something and bring Abraham back down to his last 2 Pokemon.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's so interesting because Adrian did want that Intimidate pressure yet again on the field, henceforth why he did switch the Incineroar out in the previous turn, because I think that is so crucial in his game plan. If he could get any more burns onto Abraham's side of the field, as all of his remaining Pokemon are of the physical damaging variants, it will be so good. As the Groudon switches out now for the Tsareena, and over on Adrian's side, the Kyogre is going to be switching out as well for the Tornadus. So very interesting turn of events. Both of the trainers opting to try to protect that weather and try to force it in the future turns, as we see Fake Out not being effective due to the Queenly Majesty and the Rock Slide from that Stack Attacker, picking up the KO onto the Incineroar, damaging the Tornadus as well, and more importantly, trying to get a bit of its damage output out thanks to that Beast Boost.
A risky play, though, for Adrian, just because if you do get the Rock Slide connect and you see that Incineroar get knocked out, you are forced to bring Kyogre back out onto the field, and once again, you are down to your final 2 Pokemon when your opponent still has the Groudon waiting in the back. Admittedly, you know, there have been enough turns of Trick Room that have passed that the Kyogre and Tornadus don't have to worry too much, but Kyogre's still gonna have to dodge at least a Power Whip this turn for Adrian to stay in the game.
Yeah, as the Rock Slide's going to be coming out right now. Let's see which move the Tsareena opts for. It does go for the Power Whip, and it hits Gabby, and it picks up the KO. So Trick Room right now absolutely paying dividends for Abraham's side, as unfortunately the Tornadus is just left to its own devices. Does connect with the Hurricane, does pick up the KO onto this Tsareena. So the only way maybe that Adrian can come out is if he can connect with Hurricanes in the sun, as well as get any sort of confusions. But this is looking like a landslide victory right now for Abraham with the Trick Room mode.
You mean landslide with the Rock Slide, or just Trick Room?
Pick up on it, Gabby. That's just that pass. I had to do it.
No, that was good, and I respect it. I always respect a good pun, but I like how Abraham's also locking in the Trick Room once again, just to seal the deal. Like you mentioned, the only way that Adrian could potentially take this game back would be for Hurricane to connect in the sun, for Hurricane to roll a Confusion in the sun, and then for Groudon to just keep attacking itself for the remainder of the game. And Groudon just being fast enough as it is to go for that Heat Crash and take the knockout before Confusion even got into the mix.
Wow, there we have it. Oh my lord, Abraham's just gonna go ahead and get that win for Mexico, which will of course mean that Mexico does now progress on to the next stage, the pool stages. So huge congratulations for Abraham being able to go ahead and swing it back for his team, for his country, and just allow such great gameplay and strategy to unfold itself and push them that step further.
Yeah, again, that was a really classic sort of Groudon versus Kyogre matchup. And what I really liked was that we got to see both of the speed control modes from Abraham for Groudon. You know, we saw this faster variant where you support Groudon with not just Tailwind, but also Electro Web as well, so it can potentially outspeed. We saw the Stack Attacka and the Trick Room mode. And I think more importantly, we saw both these trainers play very conservatively with these restricted Pokemon, you know, trying to position them in a way so that they would be the last Pokemon on the field so that you get your weather. And if you're looking to run Groudon or Kyogre or really any weather setter in any metagame, it doesn't necessarily have to be Series 10. This was a really good match to kind of go back and reflect on, to just see that board control and start thinking about how you can, you know, apply those plays or those thinking to your own play style.
Yeah, so I mean, just to follow up on that point, of course, it is all about the weather wars when you have these kind of restricteds that you've opted to go for in this kind of matchup. And as you can see, how important, I would say personally, it's more important for Kyogre to try to have its weather setup rather than the Groudon, only because of the fact that that Groudon can still land so hard with its Precipice Blades. It threatens so much damage, especially, for example, when it has its Trick Room accompanied by it. So it's all about getting your restricted to move first, essentially, and that's what we saw. So whenever each trainer got their restricted to move first, they won the game, and that's essentially what we saw develop in this game through where Abraham was able to successfully get his Trick Room up going.
Yeah, and also, I mean, that's a great way to phrase it too, because outside of the whole concept of a weather war, you do have these other restricted Pokemon that like to go first, like Calyrex Shadow or Zacian. So I think restricted Pokemon go zoomies is a good way to describe like a core strategic element of the Series 10 metagame.
Oh, 100%. As of course, we've got more action in store for you. So we're going to cut to a very short break. And then we do have the Guatemala versus Philippines match. So don't go anywhere. And we'll be right back in just a few moments.